Welcome to Mindshift Power Podcast, the only international podcast focused on teens, connecting young voices and perspectives from around the world. Get ready to explore the issues that matter to today's youth and shape tomorrow's world. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mindshifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Guy Waltman. And he and I are going to take a very deep dive into the subject of motivation. And so I'm really glad to have him here today, and I will allow him to introduce himself. So go ahead, Guy, and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, I appreciate the warm introduction. And for those who don't want to be bored to death with a resume, I would say that I am a son to two incredible parents. I'm a brother to an unparalleled sister. I am a proud boyfriend to the healthiest and most beautiful love of my life. And I am a life coach, which is something that I hope to add some perspective on what that even means here today.
All right. So let's start off with that. What is life coaching to you?
Yes. So life coaching is a lesser understood profession, and it's viewed as by many, well, really just like not a serious profession because of how improperly so many life coaches approach the space. So let me tell you what life coaching isn't. Life coaching is not being a therapist without a license.
Say that again, please.
Life coaching is not being a therapist without a license, right? That would be what's called illegal.
Right.
So what therapy is, for at least like for the intents and purposes of this conversation, I like to describe therapy as 80%, the word would be reactive, and 20% proactive. What do I mean by that?
Right.
So as a therapist, you often find out what you will be discussing when your client shows up for the session. So a typical therapy session begins with the therapist saying, so tell me what's going on. And then you, the client, you set the agenda. You talk about, the shit going on at home or work, whatever. And then so that's the 80%, me as a therapist, I'm going to be reacting to what you are saying. And then there's going to be a minority portion in which I'm going to add some wisdom, some expertise, and try and chime in and give you maybe like a course correction or something. Life coaching is the inverse of that. So life coaching is 80%. The big bulk is actually what I am bringing to the table, because you as the client, you are going to find out what we are going to be discussing when you show up for the session. So you show up, and then me, the professional, I say, so here's what we are talking about today, right? So it is the opposite of therapy. What life coaches have the responsibility to do is have the courage to say, I am an expert in X, Y, or Z. So you can hire me to teach you about that thing. And these are my credentials that justify my expertise in that thing. And I think life coaching at its finest is actually sort of like a school where there's a bona fide curriculum that people can pay to traverse through. And that is my claim. So as a life coach, I proclaim expertise in the domains of physical health, mental health, and relationship dynamics. And that is the bulk, if not the damn near full extent, of the proactive education that I give my clients.
Yes. And thank you for that explanation. There are lots of other things I could add to that list, but I like the way you worded it. There is a big difference between life coaching and therapy. And as a mind shift coach myself, I have the same conversations that you have with people that, all right, I do therapize as a natural part of coaching, but I am not a therapist. So if you're looking for a therapist, I can make some recommendations. Don't come to me for that, because it's not what I offer. And it's not what I do. It's not what I'm trained in,
Something can be therapeutic,
right,
and not be therapy, right? Ping pong is immensely therapeutic for me, right? Just the metronome of just boom, 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 hitting that ball on a table that's folded in half just by myself is therapeutic, right? Things can be like rejuvenating, revitalizing, and the word would be therapeutic, but not be something that you had to go and be a professional licensed therapist to provide.
Right. So tell us, how did you get into life coaching?
The journey began. So as I sit here in a state of contemplation, it's really just to decide how extensive of an answer do I want to provide, because the professional path of mine began at the university level, in which my father was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Mm,
So when that happened, what I found almost like impossible to reconcile was how fascinating I found his brain tumor. So the more I would research it, the more interest I had in it. And I actually had a level of guilt surrounding that. Like, what kind of person am I that I am finding this thing that's killing my father so fascinating? So what I did at that time was I declared my academic studies to neuroscience with a plan of being a neurosurgeon, which excited my mother to be able to tell people. but but my change of course occurred upon just contemplating what a life would be like to be solely on the side of treatment and not have a hand in prevention. And I was an athlete my whole life, and I'm sure I would have been a phenomenal surgeon. I have good hands and steady hands and a sharp mind, and I'm sure could have done great work as a neurosurgeon. But I don't think I would live a fulfilled life. I don't think I would have gratification in my work life if I was, again, like solely on the side of treatment, meaning dealing with already existing brain tumors. I want a role in helping people optimize their lives in the first place. And I believe that that is
mm.
how I can make a far greater impact on the world. And that took some time to figure out how I want to get that accomplished, but I ultimately landed on life coach.
So what motivated you to become a life coach is to be the change you wanted to see.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, yeah. My father and my mother both serve as the foundational inspirations in my professional path.
Mm,
My father on the physical health side and my mother on the mental health side. So my mother, she has had a life that is, at least by like Western civilization standards, like here for myself anyway in the United States, my mom had a harder life than most. And the mind, just like the body, right? If you go into the gym and you push yourself too hard, you can pull a muscle. The mind has a breaking point as well. And my mom reached hers in my like adult life.
okay.
And so here I was as a professional, really focusing almost all of my efforts in the physical health space for so long. Then witnessing my mother reach her psychological breaking point, and she had two bona fide suicide attempts, one of which has left her permanently damaged. She had two strokes, needed to have three brain surgeries, spent some time in the local homeless shelter here where I was, where I live, because she refused to live with me because she didn't want to be a burden on my home life, like with my romantic partner. So she was actually homeless and receiving services from society at large for a while. And so watching her mental health decline combined with
Mm.
watching my father's physical health decline has turned me into the professional I am now. So yeah, it's really both of my parents that have served to be my inspirations.
So they inspired you in two very different ways.
Yeah.
And that's very fascinating. Something that comes to mind when you talk about that is, I think a lot of times people don't recognize that what they've been through can be a useful tool for their future if they know how to use it, you know? And we just heard you tell some of your story, and you turned it into a useful tool that to help, that motivated you to help other people. I think that that is awesome. That you've taken what you've been through to and using it to catapult you into a profession that helps others.
I would have to
Um,
think that so many of the people who you serve receive coaching from you in that similar vein where you will communicate to them. Not only do you have something that that you can offer the world, right? But it is actually because of what you have been through or are presently going through that will
mm-hmm,
make you more uniquely equipped
mm-hmm.
to serve
Yep.
someday, right? Like that old adage that you can only appreciate the view from the mountaintop if you've been in the deepest valley. And so,
Yes,
like,
yes,
I
yes.
have clients who, I mean, my God, a client of mine, his name was Scott Havens. His name still is Scott Havens. He's still alive. But,
Could have
so,
changed it.
yeah, a client of mine named Scott. And when I had met Scott, he was 640 pounds.
Oh wow.
So, for perspective, if you can picture a California king size bed, when he would lay in the dead center of his bed, his stomach would actually eclipse the sides. That's how much
Wow.
his stomach would pan outwards. And through working with Scott over 4 years of time, he lost 410 pounds. And when asked, right, so Scott, like, do you regret really so much of your life, right? Because you don't, first of all, you don't get that heavy overnight. And he stayed quite heavy for quite a long time. So we are talking about decades of time, probably 2 decades of time in which he was not able to experience the world in so many of the ways that you and I take for granted. So really, it's kind of like just like pissing 20 years of your life down the drain. So when asked, Scott, do you have regrets surrounding that? He said, I do not. He said, because the amount that I appreciate life right now in this new form, in this new body, with these new capabilities, I never would have appreciated if I didn't know what it was like in the deepest valley, right?
Yep.
That
Yep.
mountaintop in the deepest valley. So he's saying that, like, sure, I could have those 20 years back, but it would have been 20 years of just taking shit for granted, left and right. He's like, I actually have a gratification in life that is greater than the vast majority of people because of what I went through. And, so to your listeners, it there's you would be hard pressed to overemphasize to them, right? Because I know that you and I share similar coaching points in this regard. It would be difficult to overemphasize to them that it really is the struggle that will make you more uniquely equipped to both enjoy life and serve others. And I'll tell you one more thing, if I may, not to bend your ear too much. And I say this through a comedic lens. When I rewind the clock to my days as a single man, and I would go out on the dating scene, I often would not seek a second date because she didn't have enough drama. It's like you're
Oh
boring,
God.
right? You're boring. Like we need I need someone with some more trauma, right? Like it's because that just gives you more color to your life. Am I right?
Yeah, when you're young and you don't know any better, you think that.
That's 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 right. That's right. That's right.
So you realize that you don't want all that after a while.
Yeah.
um, so you have something called the Windmill of Motivation. Can you tell us what that is?
Oh, certainly. That's you teed me right up. So the windmill of motivation is perhaps the original concept of mine that I am the most excited about, in that I think it has the greatest potential to impact human beings. The windmill of motivation is a diagnostic tool able to help you decipher any reason why you are struggling with motivation in your life. So what I am doing here is I'm making a a really bold assertion, which is that any time in your life that you are lacking motivation, there is one of five reasons for that. Okay, five. And so really the mystery of motivation, right? For those, because there's no visual here, I'm putting up bunny ears. The mystery of motivation really is a mystery no more in my proclamation. I believe there are 5 ingredients to having world-class motivation. And if you have all 5 of these ingredients, you will run through a brick wall for the things that you want. But as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you miss even just a single one of these 5 ingredients, you are immediately flatlined, melancholy, and unmotivated. I depict these 5 ingredients in the visual of a windmill because of what windmills in the actual world around us do. So windmills, when you see those things, spinning on the horizon, what windmills are doing is they are generating energy. And that
Mm-hmm.
is what motivation is within human beings. Motivation is a form of energy, right? When people are described as unmotivated or like lazy, what you are describing is a state of low energy. And there's a metaphorical inner windmill inside all of us that does not automatically spin, right? Just the
Mm-hmm.
same way that a windmill doesn't have energy, a windmill generates energy. Humans don't just have energy or motivation either. We have to generate it just like windmills do. And again, there are 5 ingredients to making that happen. That's the windmill.
Okay. There's a particular one of the pieces of the windmill that I had heard you say before really intrigued me, and this is the one I want to talk about. In order to be motivated, we need to feel first, right?
So, in order to take high quality action, you certainly do not, right? In order to start, you most certainly do
But don't I
not.
have to feel like it first?
Oh my goodness, no. Oh my goodness, no. And and right there, see now, with as I lean forward here, 18, ish minutes into this podcast, what we have arrived at, and I really am not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. We have arrived at, if people could grasp how profound this point is, we have arrived at something that could truly change the lives of billions of people, billions of people, which is that no, you really don't need to be in the mood, right? You don't need to feel like it, right? In order to start. And in fact, the greatest psychological plague of the planet, at least in my estimation, is that people wait in order to feel motivated. You know
Mm-hmm.
how sometimes a car needs help turning on, like
Yeah.
literally getting started, but once you turn it on, aka like you jump it, right?
Oh, great
Once the car
analogy.
does
Yeah.
turn on, the car doesn't have any difficulty staying on, right?
Right.
So we need, sometimes humans just need a jump. That's it. We just need jumper cables. But once we start, it's not hard to keep going. Like, so when the dishes are piled up in my sink, I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing the dishes, right?
Right.
And so I don't, and I walk away and I keep circling back. And what happens, ready, is the mess spreads. So now the blankets aren't folded, the laundry needs to get done, the trash is piling over. And so finally what I do is I attach the jumper cables. Okay? And so what are the jumper cables? The jumper cables come in the form of just do it, of just do it anyway, even though you aren't in the mood. Okay, even though you don't feel like it. It's called cognitive override. That's the term. Cognitive meaning like the mind, and override meaning we're just going to override the fact that we don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need to force yourself into action and pick up that first dish in the sink. And guess what's not so hard to pick up? Is that second dish,
Yep.
right? Once you overcome that initial energy needed to just start, next thing you know, you get like addicted to cleaning. Has that ever happened to you? Like, honest question. Is it just me, or has it actually happened to you where you start cleaning and all of a sudden you're like getting hooked on it? That you get like hooked on cleaning. You don't want to stop cleaning. You get
Oh
hooked on the
yeah, I'm
project.
very clean. So yeah, and it's like, oh well, let me clean off the
Right.
shelf now. You know what? I should clean out the fridge.
That's what it is. So it's again, not to beat the dead horse, right? But the car needs a jump start, and it comes in the form of jumper cables. Sometimes the human being needs a jump start, and it comes in the form of a really valuable skill, which is just the discipline to be able to force oneself into action, even though you aren't motivated. Because, listen closely, do not miss this. This is the moment, ladies and gentlemen at home. This is the moment, boys and girls, that you want to hear. Because the greatest misconception of motivation is in thinking that you have to be motivated before you take action, because in actuality, we often don't get motivated at all until we take action. Right? We don't want to go to the gym. Right? We don't feel like it. But once you get there and you start, it's not hard to finish your workout, right? You don't feel like writing your essay, but if you just sit down in front of your laptop, right, or pen and paper, once you just start, the words just start flowing. The motivation kicks in upon us starting. So if we are waiting to be motivated, we might be waiting a long time.
I'm going to bring this up. I did an episode recently where we talked about unforgiveness. And we pointed out the fact that forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. The feelings will follow the choice. And I think that principle applies here as well. It's not about feelings. The feeling will follow the action once you get started. And I completely agree with you 1,000%. I can think about just working out. You know, you're like, oh, I don't feel like working out. But then once you get there and you start lifting your weights, you start doing your leg press, whatever you're doing, then it's like, okay, it's not so hard to get on to the next one. You just have to make the decision to get started. And then your feelings behind why you want to do it they'll arrive, because it's like you said, you got the car started. So now the engine's like, all right, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
You know,
I really value that analogy that you gave, and I really appreciate that you are sharing a personal experience from your life, and we have kinship in that. As a life coach, I do a lot of teaching about a very specific word, and that word is abilities. And there are many things in this world that are abilities that we don't think of as abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, tennis is obviously an ability, right? There's a spectrum of ability, and if you can picture a spectrum, right, a left to right spectrum, then all the way over to the right is Serena Williams, okay, and all the way to the left is an infant who isn't even able, right, to participate in the sport, right, and then you and I are somewhere in between, right?
Yep.
Well, forgiveness is a skill. But we don't often think of that as a skill. You're vocalizing it as a decision, and I completely agree, and I'm 100% stealing that. But you know what else it is? It's an ability. There are people who are better at forgiving than others. That makes it an ability, right? If there's a spectrum
I never
of
thought of it that
ability,
way, but yeah, I
then it
see your
makes
point.
it a ability, right? All the way to the right is Serena Williams in tennis, and I suppose all the way to the right is Jesus Christ, right?
Right.
And then all the way to the left would be just someone, right, who is probably the devil, right, and just the Antichrist, right? So, and then you and I are going to be somewhere in between. So, a different ability that really warrants great consideration is, again, like the ability to do things when you don't feel like it, right? That is an ability. And there are people who are just way better at that than others, right? Like David Goggins, for those who might be familiar with this Navy SEAL from the United States, or Jocko Willink, or just think of any badass, right, if you will, right? You know what they've really gotten good at through Hell Week with the Navy SEALs, right, and all this stuff. They've gotten really good at just doing it anyway, which applies not just to go into the gym, but it applies to doing your taxes, right? It applies, my God, sometimes it applies to so many things that in a vacuum, or what I mean by in a vacuum, when you look at it on its own, you don't think has a great impact on your life. But if you recognize the degree in which these things accumulate, they actually damn near control your life, right? When you get home late and and you don't feel like jumping in the shower because it's 11 p.m. and you feel like the shower's gonna, like wake you up or something. You just feel like crawling into bed. But because you didn't shower and you're sticky, you get in the bed, now you can't sleep, you toss and turn all night. Well, now you wake up the next day and now you're dog shit and the whole next day's, in the crapper. As opposed to like just the whatever, like I don't feel like showering, it's 11 at night,
Yeah.
do it anyway, right? I don't
Yes.
feel like flossing, do it anyway, right? I don't, whatever that thing is, you just do it anyway. And oh my God, the accumulative effect of that across your lifespan is is what will give you a shot at reaching your full potential in life. And I can promise you that you won't even scratch the surface of your greatest potential if you only do things when you feel like doing it. You'll
Absolutely.
just you'll never make the climb as high as you yearn to.
Yeah, you hit it at the end because I was going to say the people who follow this mindset, the people who actually do the things that they don't feel like doing, are the very people who usually are successful. The people who follow this mindset and understand that you don't wait until you have a feeling to do what you need to do, the motivation will come afterwards. That's really as you said, self-discipline. And it's the people with discipline that are successful, not the most talented. It's the people with the most discipline. You could be extremely talented and that doesn't mean a damn thing if you aren't disciplined enough to do the right thing consistently with it, then you can't grow. That's why you see music stars that pop up for about 15 minutes of fame and then they fail. Some of them is because they have a whole lot of talent and nothing else. They got no
Yeah,
discipline, no
yeah,
maturity, no know how to handle money, nothing else. And they don't
yeah,
succeed. The ones who do succeed usually have more than just a singing talent.
yeah. If I can introduce a word to your audience, keeping in mind that we both have a soft spot in our lives for just like the younger people of this
Yeah.
world, and there's a word that was immensely helpful to me when I was growing up, and that word was or is intangibles. Okay, so like what does it mean for something to be tangible? It means that you can touch it, right? Intangible is then something that you can't touch, right? But that doesn't mean it's not really important, right? So for success, right, you think that I have to be a good singer, right? So like that's the skill, right? Or I have to be really good at putting this basketball in that hoop, right? That's tangible. I can see it, right? That ball's going to go through that hoop. But often what holds people back from their success are the intangibles. So it's the things like you just said, like your maturity, right? Or your level of kindness towards others, right? So I don't, my God, you could be a really great basketball player, but if no one likes being around you, right, and you're just constantly rubbing people the wrong way, well, then you might not make the team. They're not going to pass you the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your intangibles, okay? Your you know, an example of an intangible, I'll get out of the sports analogy in a moment, but like in the basketball sense, it'd be like, are you clutch? Right? Do you want that ball in your hand when the clock is winding down in the fourth quarter, or do you run away? Right? So, but intangibles in the professional world or in the day-to-day life amongst just people, intangibles are just going to be again that maturity level, your level of emotional intelligence, your level of how well read you are, and your kindness, and your level of appreciation and gratitude, how forgiving you are, how remorseful you are, meaning how quick are you to apologize when you realize you've done something wrong, how
Yeah.
loyal are
Yeah.
you in your relationship. These things really make the man, and these things really make the woman, and shouldn't be forgotten or underappreciated in relation to the skill, right? Or the thing that you like your dream. It's not enough to be great at your craft. You have to also have these intangibles.
I would like you to right now talk to all the teens listening right now. If you could give them one piece of advice, what is it?
One piece of advice for teens. My God. So right now, I mean, because I still identify as a young person. I'm in my early 30s. There's there's certain life decisions that you start contemplating when you are my age. You think about being a dad and bringing kids into this world and stuff. And I'll tell you, the world right now is not an inspiring place to bring a kid into, at least in my
Yeah.
opinion. And part of the reason why I would say is is the cell phone and everything that goes with it, right? And like in the social media. I if speaking to young people, if you were to ask me to kind of like give one singular piece of advice that if you just trusted me, I know it'll pay dividends. It's just either get off of social media like entirely, or at least build a healthy lens for viewing everything you see. It is like, I promise you, everyone around you is not living a better life than you. But that's what
Yes.
Facebook and Instagram make us believe,
Hmm.
because through, through taking 30 photos and the editing, the filters, the just whatever it is, what and people, by the way, they don't post their they don't post their bad days. Okay.
Hmm.
So what you are seeing is a collection of their brightest moments. Okay. And I'm telling you, their life is not that good. It's not. They aren't that happy. They aren't that successful. They aren't. And so not only is social media anti-social media, but it's if we get too if we get too bound to it, then what we run, I would say, a very high risk of is we run the risk of doubting ourselves, right? Because we're going to look at our lives and we're going to say like, well, I'm not living a life that good. Well, yes, you are. Yes, you are, right? Like maybe they're just posting their higher moments. Like, they're not that far ahead of you. You have to believe in yourself. And those types of things, I think, start to get chipped away at slowly over time when we're glued to our phones.
Yes.
And and yeah, I know that you need a phone. I get it. I
Hmm.
really do get it. But if I was gonna be a father, I'm telling you something right now, they're having a dumb phone. Okay? They're and, and they'll be none the wiser. Do you
You
know
don't get
how
a
psyched
smartphone,
I
my
was?
child. You get a dumb phone.
Do you, do you know how psyched I was to get a razor back in the day? You remember that? You remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the early 2000s.
You kidding me? That razor did the job, okay?
It
Like,
was really cool too.
like it was, right? Like, my kids are gonna have a dump phone, and but I'm telling you, like like you and me, we had to pick up a landline and then have an uncomfortable conversation
Yep.
with your friend's parent, be like, "Hi, uh, is Brian home? Can I talk to, can Brian come and play?" Like that, yo, but that puts some hair on your chest. Like that is good
Right.
for you instead of hiding behind a keyboard, right?
I really like what you
So
said about not the don't compare, and I think that's like the biggest thing that you just said. I just a lot of times, and this is not just our youth doing it either. There are some grown ass teenagers who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are doing it too, and
yeah,
comparing ourselves to
yeah,
fakeness. And that's what
yeah,
we
yeah,
don't
yeah,
realize is okay, we see a tiny piece of what they want us to see that's already
yeah.
been manipulated. We don't see the
Mhm.
full picture. And in fact, you're probably doing better than them, but you're
Oh,
comparing
certainly.
yourself against a falsity. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. Stop comparing yourself against fakeness. You are real. Your life is real. What they show you ain't.
Yeah.
Very often
As
isn't.
cliche as this is, the only person you should be comparing yourself to is you yesterday.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Actually, that's on my wall.
Yeah, you
There's a version
yesterday.
of that quote that's on my
That's it.
wall. So how
Yeah.
can people find you?
Your best bet to find me would be through the website or really just through Instagram. The website is myname.com. So it's guywaltman.com, GUYWALTMAN.com. And then the Instagram handle, guy_Waltman. If you reach out through either one of those pathways, I'm bound to see it and really just would love to hear from you. I am I think of like a really like sweet spot age in which I can connect with both young and older audiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough when you're in your 20s trying to command respect from adults, right? And parents, but I now have I think enough life experience which I'm able to do that. And I would say the probably half of the work that I do is with young people.
Do you
And
speak
that's
at schools and colleges?
all the time, school assemblies, and I have about a dozen, maybe just shy of a dozen higher education institutions in which I'll do some guest lecturing. I'd say a big bulk of what I do is just like the keynote for
Mm-hmm.
corporate professionals, but I never turn down a school invitation. I don't do enough of it simply due to just the difficulty with school budgets and things like that. But I
Yeah,
certainly have
I
never
get
turned
that.
down a school assembly.
All right. Well, thanks again, Guy, for coming on. I really, really appreciate you being a guest here on My Shift Power Podcast. And I hope that you were able to plant some really powerful thought seeds in the minds of the listeners today.
I would like to thank you for having me on. You and I have built some rapport just in like the week in which we've gotten in touch, but to trust me with your listeners means a great deal. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want to focus for a moment on something that we talked about, a principle that we talked about in this episode, and you've heard me say before. Stop waiting for your feelings to guide you and tell you what to do. Stop waiting for your feelings to be where you think they should be before you make the moves you need to make. That's what people who never get anywhere do. It's all about a decision. Your feelings matter, but your feelings will follow. Your feelings are fragile. Your feelings can change like the wind. But if you make a decision, that's when things begin to change. You decide to forgive. You decide that I'm going to get this done whether I feel like it or not. And that's how you get it done. What are you waiting for? What area of life are you waiting to feel something before you do it? Now, specifically to my American audience, our culture has taught us a lot of lies, and this is one of them. You do not have to have feelings before you take action. So I want you to go back and listen to some of the principles that Guy talked about today behind making a move and then getting motivated. Many of you are successes waiting to happen, but you're sitting around and waiting for a feeling. Get up and move and watch the feelings follow. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe to Mindshift Power Podcast on any of our worldwide platforms, so you too can be a part of the conversation that's changing young lives everywhere. And always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.